as well as a senior prosecutor. The measures bar them from entering the US and from carrying out transactions there in the US financial systems. Now, the ICC has criticized the decision, releasing a statement today saying these sanctions are a flagrant attack against the independence of an impartial judicial institution. When judicial actors are threatened for applying the law, it is the international legal order itself that is placed at risk. It's the Trump administration's latest effort to undermine the ICC. The court's under intense pressure from the US government, primarily because of its investigation into the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu over alleged war crimes in the Gaza Strip. One of the court members targeted in these latest sanctions was a lead prosecutor in the Netanyahu investigation. The court says the United States has now sanctioned half of its judges and both deputy prosecutors. The US is also increasing the pressure on countries to withdraw from the court. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said the US wants to dismantle the ICC brick by brick. Here's how he described it last month.
The International Criminal Court is an illegitimate international organization that, frankly, illegitimate. They've made themselves illegitimate because they claim that even if you're not a member of that court, they can come after you. These are the people that think they can go out and basically indict any world leader and haul them into The Hague.
Well, Alex Whiting is a professor of practice at Harvard Law School, where he specializes in international criminal law. He's also worked extensively as an international prosecutor. Welcome to the day. From the outside, this looks like the White House getting the court because it issued an arrest warrant for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his defense minister for alleged war crimes. Is that too simplistic?
No, I think that is an important part of what's going on here. It's not the full picture. The United States began to impose sanctions on prosecutors and judges at the court as a result of the arrest warrants for Netanyahu and Gallant in Israel. So that certainly was an important motivator. I think a second thing that's happening here is this administration actually is concerned that the court might in the future issue arrest warrants for Americans as a result of actions in, for example, the high seas or in Central and Latin America. The U.S. military is taking steps, for example, blowing up boats, suspected, alleged drug boats in the oceans that some have described as being crimes against humanity, and I think there is some concern on the part of this administration that the court might one day try to act against American officials.
See, what's interesting about that is, of course, that US hostility towards the ICC isn't new. Joe Biden described the court's arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu as outrageous. Is that just because, and of course the US is not a signatory to the court, so does that antipathy stem from the role that America has played around the world for so many decades?
Well, I think the U.S. historically has had a very hot and cold or up and down relationship with the International Criminal Court. It's had moments of hostility, for example, in 2000, when the court first began operating in 2002. Again, at the beginning of the Trump administration, as you said, President Biden also condemned the court for the arrest warrants against Netanyahu. But at other times, the U.S. has been very supportive of the court. He's even turned to the court to take actions in places like Sudan, 2005, in Libya in 2011, and Ukraine in 2022, and that was bipartisan. Both Democrats and Republicans in the United States supported the International Court conducting investigations. I do think that when the court acts or threatens to act against the United States or against close allies, then things are different. And the government, the administration, and this is true for Democrats and Republicans, tend to push back against the court. And I will say that initially you might say in past administrations, the thinking was that the U.S. could take care of its own war crimes allegations domestically, that there was no need for an international criminal court because the U.S. would conduct investigations of its own personnel for alleged crimes. I think it's different with this administration. I think this administration does not have any faith or belief in the rule of international law when it comes to war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. And I think that this administration is being protective of U.S. personnel and U.S. officials because of the very aggressive actions that it's taking around the world militarily.
Okay. Let's take a look at a couple of the allegations that the US has made against the court. We've recently seen the court's chief prosecutor dismissed over allegations of sexual misconduct. The White House claims the court is corrupt and fatally politicized. Do you think there's any truth to that?
No, I don't think there's truth to that. And it is true that the Kareem Khan, the prosecutor of the court, was dismissed by the Assembly of States Parties. To me, that showed a kind of ability of the court to hold people at the court accountable for breaking rules. That is really an internal and separate matter. It's been dealt with, separate from the allegations made by the administration that the court is politicized. There's really no evidence of that. There's no evidence that the court has acted politically. And my experience at the court is that that's not how the prosecutors, investigators, judges at the court behave. They're extremely professional. They're committed to the rule of law. They investigate allegations of war crimes, crimes against humanity, and so forth, where they find them, and they pursue the facts. The court operates in a political world, and it's often influenced and affected by politics and the politics of states. It's constrained in those ways, but it is not itself political.
Right.
And if I could just add, the Rubio's criticism or allegation that the court is acting improperly because it is prosecuting or investigating individuals from states that are not members of the court. That legally there is no issue with that. That is really a false argument because if I from the United States, I go to the United Kingdom or I go to a country in Africa or in the Middle East and I commit a crime there, I can be prosecuted by that state. If that state gives its criminal jurisdiction to the International Criminal Court, the International Criminal Court can have jurisdiction over somebody committing a crime in that state. So legally, that is not a controversial proposition.
Washington, though, is pressuring countries to leave the court. Chad and Venezuela have answered that call. How much will a gathering boycott undermine the court's legitimacy?
If the United States pressures states and is successful in persuading states to leave the court, that will definitely undermine the effectiveness of the court and its legitimacy. There's no question about that. I think it remains to be seen how far the U.S. will go to pressure states to actually leave, and whether states will take that step, that consequential step. Obviously the United States has all sorts of interests with states, and whether it's going to expend political, economic, diplomatic capital to pressure states to step back from the court, we still have to see whether that will happen. It's happened with Chad and with Venezuela. Right. Will it happen with others? We will see.
Just stepping back, do you think that there is any chance that this sort of intimidation from the United States might make the court defensive, maybe thinking twice before going after people that the US wouldn't want them to target?
Well, that's a really good question, and I think that there are two answers to that. I think the first answer is that officials at the court are not going to be cowed by threats. They're not going to back off. They're not going to be made afraid. And so I think that this pressure campaign, I think these threats, this vow to dismantle the court will ultimately be unsuccessful. It's not going to work. On the other hand, the court is a fragile institution. It has very few independent powers, and it has to think about being strategic in in which case there's one to continue to do the work it's assigned to do, and the other to avoid finding itself in positions where it cannot succeed.
Thanks for talking us through that.